Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here today to talk about how you can make your own all-natural face mask, but also works well as a hair mask. If you've never heard of making a clay mask for your hair. I don't like to do that as often, but I find when I do use it on my hair, it just makes it so soft. So my goal today is to give you a few different ideas of how you can make it according to your own skin type. And I'm going to share with you my exact recipe by measurement that I recently used and find I'm really liking it for my very dry skin. My two favorite clays to use are bentonite clay and kaolin clay. Now these can be used alone if you want. Just keep in mind that bentonite clay is going to be the harshest, and it dries a lot harder, and it really pulls a lot out of the skin, which is great because it's going to pull out a lot of the impurities and the toxins out of your skin, which is why a lot of people like bentonite clay. But if you have very dry skin, it can be a little harsh. I was using it for a while, but found that even sometimes just one day it would turn my face red for a while. And if I used it a couple days in a row, that was no good. Normally I wouldn't do that many times in a row anyway. It might be just a once a week thing if I even think of it. But I would see this being great for oily skin to use just as is. Now kaolin clay by itself would be really good for very, very dry and sensitive skin because it's going to be a lot more gentle. It washes off a lot easier than the bentonite clay and doesn't dry as hard as a bentonite clay, which is why it washes off easier. But what I find I really like to do is a 1-to-1 blend of the two, so 50-50 when I'm making the face mask. And then another thing I do like to do, and I highly recommend, if you happen to have any good herbs on hand that you already have dried up, or they don't even have to be dry, you can use them fresh, make yourself a tea out of these herbs that are really good for skin. I just brought 4 out, but this is just an example. So here I have lilac flowers, I have calendula flowers, dandelion flowers, and honeysuckle flowers. Other ones that you could consider would be lavender, marshmallow, like they can be the leaves and the flowers, pansy flowers, rose petals, even comfrey or plantain. These are all great herbs for your skin. There's many more out there. It's just an example I wanted to throw out there. And it can be one of those, or it can be any combination of those. Typically when I do this, I use a combination. I'll just throw a bunch of herbs together and then make a tea. It's something that when you make the tea, because you're using more delicate herbs, that you want to heat your water and then pour it over the herbs and then let it steep for a while. Then you use that as your water for adding to the clay. Okay, so starting from there, what you're going to want to start with is, so you do 1-to-1. I say start with a really small amount. Like, don't try to do a big, huge amount at a time because it could still mold on you no matter what you add to it. And you may find out you don't like it that much or you don't use it that much. So I say start with it, just making a small amount. You might be surprised at how much just a teaspoon and a teaspoon will make once you start adding your liquid, because bentonite clay in particular soaks up a lot of liquid, like a lot. It's very, very absorbent, so you'll find yourself having to keep adding more water. I would start with 3 times the amount of the liquid. So let's say you're doing a teaspoon of this, a teaspoon of that. Keep in mind that's going to give you enough to do a facial mask maybe at least 4 times. So when you go to mix this, let's say you're doing a teaspoon of each, you're going to want to then, remember, you're tripling the amount of the water to the powder to the clay. So you're going to want a total of 6 teaspoons at least, which is equivalent to 2 tablespoons. Then if it's still too thick, just keep adding a little more of the water or the tea until you get the right consistency. Now, another thing that I decided to try new when I made this last batch of clay was I added an equal amount of olive oil. So I did 1 part to 1 part to 1 part. So in other words, I put a teaspoon of the olive oil in there. I would say add this last. I made the mistake of adding it before I had the clay fully hydrated the way it should be. It's going to be a lot easier to blend if you add the oil after you got your water content pretty good. And then some other ideas that you can consider is adding a drop or two of your favorite skin benefiting essential oil, such as ylang ylang, rose, frankincense, lavender, geranium, grapefruit, and so many more out there that you can add. For the size I'm talking about, maybe a couple of drops would be sufficient. Once you have this made and you like your consistency, just apply it to your face, allow it to dry completely, keeping in mind that if you're using the oil, and this would be if you have very dry skin. If you have very oily skin, I would just say don't bother with this. And you can play with those amounts. You can add less. I would say the max of the oil was the amount I used. I wouldn't say going more than that. But it is going to cause it to take longer for it to fully dry. And then once it's fully dry, then just go ahead and wash it off. Some people say don't let it dry all the way, but if you're adding the oil to it, you can let it dry all the way and it's going to come off easy. It's going to help moisturize the skin. I still end up having to put on my skin cream afterwards, but it's also going to cleanse the skin and help pull the toxins out of the skin. And the bentonite clay and all these other things are really good for healing different skin issues as well. So these are just a few ideas that you can kind of play with. Again, you don't have to use both types of clay. You might even have, there's so many different types of clays you can use to make your own facial mask. These are just the two I prefer. But maybe just to give you a jumping off point, some things to consider and try, such as making the herbal tea to do that. And then as far as the tea goes, if you have way more than you needed for making the clay mask, then just drink the rest of it, because all of those herbs are going to be healthy for you on the inside as well. Oh, and the oil, one more thing, is that even though I use olive oil in that, if you have another type of oil you prefer, be it avocado, grapeseed, you like these better, feel free to use those instead. I just used olive oil in this case because for such things, when I don't have to infuse it, I like being able to use my olive oil, and it is excellent for your skin. So anyway, any thoughts, ideas you would like to share, please put those in comments down below, or any questions you have. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.